Hey everybody, this is Way to Fail here today with more Kerbal Space Program, and today Jebediah is going to the moon. That's right, we're doing a moon mission on hard mode. This is actually a pretty good return on investment both for science and for contracts. So we're going to be making a few trips to the moon. This is not a landing mission. You can see we have little landing legs at the very end, but we don't have the Delta V for it. We have 6 solid state boosters and then another stage to try and get us into orbit. And then we're going to be kind of cutting, because we've gotten into orbit a few times here, we're going to be cutting kind of just to getting into the actual flight to the moon using the LV-909 engine. I have 1 fuel tank on that as well. And one of the key things to keep in mind is that we are actually doing this without patch conics again. I have still not unlocked it. So you can see I don't do the most efficient orbital burn ever. But what we're going to be doing here today is actually getting to the moon without maneuver nodes, which is surprisingly simple. And it is going, as I said in previous videos, harkening back a little bit to old school Kerbal Space Program pre-maneuver nodes. And if you want to know how to get to a moon, it's actually a lot simpler from a rule of thumb standpoint than I might have expected, might have recalled. I'm sure there's a better mathematical explanation for it. But the old adage was, if you want to fly to the moon in Kerbal Space Program, back in it was just Kerbin and the moon, you just wait till the moon pops on the horizon and you burn prograde. And so that's essentially what we're going to do here. Now, I'm not going to wait for the moon to get all the way to the horizon, because that gets it's a little less efficient to do it that way. But you want the moon to be about 30 degrees off from where your orbit is. If your ship's at the 6 o'clock position, you want it to be at about like 1:32, something like that. It'll pop up here in just a minute. This is post-commentary recording, of course. But I am adjusting my orbit accordingly. I do have a happy accident where I will be burning towards the moon near the, not near the prograde. I am burning prograde, obviously, but near the periapse of my orbit. Because if you can time it right, you do want to burn near the periapse as best as possible. That is for the most efficient burning. And we are going to be a little tight on fuel, even though we're going for an orbit here. My contracts are for collecting science around the moon and orbit. There we go. Burning the LV-909, which is important to have something to actually be able to get into space, because the LV-909 cannot by itself actually escape orbit. But this is going to be about 800 Delta V, I think, roundabout, to get to the moon and get to orbit. There's some good charts that you can find online. I still consult them from time to time, but if you see here, I'm not using any maneuver nodes, and we're actually, as this apoapsis increases, slowly but surely, first off, you got to kind of babysit it, because with a ship this light, once we start getting out here, you can see it is going faster and faster, and this is at like ×2 acceleration on the video, so just keep that in mind. But as the apoapse goes up here, you're going to see that we do not actually have an encounter with the moon. And that is one of the challenges for this, is that you're going to have to just really understand the orbital mechanics. And this is going to make interplanetary missions interesting. I will try that without patch conics, although it is a bit tougher and maybe not as cost efficient. But here we go. Time accelerating towards the moon, and you can see we're flying towards the moon. And we have our correct angle of approach, and it's going to be getting bigger and bigger. But once again, there's no encounter here, so you have to just hope for the best and hope that you timed everything right. And what do we got? Moon's getting closer. Keep in mind that when you get to the apoapsis, you're going to be starting to slow down quite a bit. So that's one reason I put my apoapse just a little bit further out than where the moon is. And there we go. We have a moon encounter. No patch conics. The maneuver nodes just changed. We're in orbit mode with the orbital trajectory around the moon. And we're at about 2 million kilometers up. So we can do some science here. Ooh, I'm so sorry. That was nearly a burp that turned into something worse. Regardless, so we will be able to get to a low periapse here, and we already have some missions getting accomplished just from science around the moon. And you can go back and forth and see if other contracts will pop in for moon encounters. That's not always a bad idea. But I think one of the bigger to-dos here is we're just going to try and work our way into an orbit. And once again, without patch conics, you cannot actually tell if you're in a stable orbit. And I did actually kind of just do a weird cut there without any transition, but we're closer now, and I'm going to be doing a retrograde burn just to try and get into a standard orbit. And if you do not, you can actually, it'll say, oh look, it looks like an orbit even though it's 5-6 million meters out and everything. But what you want to do is actually watch your contract meter the first go around, because it will blink when you get the moon exploration mission. If you have it, you get an achievement for getting an orbit around the moon. So you'll get a little alarm clock kind of warning there. It says, haha, you have actually gotten in a stable orbit around the moon. Because if your apoapsis is at like 6 million, it says you have an orbit, but you don't. You will just escape from the moon because your computers are not apparently that strong. So we're going to have a little bit of a dark video here, but you can see I still have a pretty elliptical orbit. And this is kind of on purpose. This is actually me jumping in. Once again, I thought I did some transitions here. We're going to save landing the moon and getting science on the moon for another time, probably with a drone mission first go around. But the other thing is you can see my fuel is kind of tight. I hope my resolution makes this work pretty well. I have barely enough fuel to get back. And I'm going to do kind of just some shenanigans just to show here. And I'm really not sure why that's jumping there. I'll have to just deal with it. I thought I'd edited this pretty well, so I apologize. But you can see here I'm burning out. It still says, look, we have a stable orbit. And right now all I'm trying to do is an escape trajectory, trying to go retrograde from the moon, because that's supposed to get us back to Kerbin, right? As we have, once again, very dark side of the moon. I'm just this my recording software seems to be really struggling with the moon lately, so we'll just figure it out. Regardless, you want to get what science you can, even around the moon. But once again, if you transmit science that has 0 value, you'll still be okay. And we are at the point where we cannot time accelerate, so we just gotta suck it up and wait until we're a little bit further out. And once again, if you burn retrograde off the moon, where is Kerbin in all of this? Well, obviously we're trying to fly towards Kerbin. There's the sun. But it's not just burning in a retrograde towards Kerbin. That's not going to be enough. As you're going to see, once we break deorbit from the moon here in just a bit, my apoapsis, once again, there it is, 5 million, and whoops. Now this is where, if you don't know anything about interplanetary travel and Kerbal Space Program, this is a good lesson to learn. You don't just want to fly retrograde off of the moon and anything like that, especially if you're in an elliptical orbit. If you're in a circular orbit, you can kind of work with it. But if you notice, the apoapsis on the elliptical orbit was actually pointing away from the planet. And as you're going to see here, I don't actually have enough fuel to get myself back in right at that. So we're going to do this right this time. And once again, we're in the same elliptical orbit. You can see where the arm of the orbit is, the apoapse. It's not just where you burn off of, because you're going to find yourself in plenty of elliptical orbits here. This is still a stable orbit. But what we're going to do is wait until we're actually pointing out. Pointing so that the end of our orbit is going retrograde entirely. In other words, this is what you're trying to do if you're going from a circular orbit. Because if you look at a lot of the orbital calculators online and everything, which are very valuable sources of information, they'll tell you, we'll burn retrograde from here. Well, that's not exactly how it works. Now, this should be a safe burn. It's not going to be a perfect burn or anything like that, but this is more of how you want to do it. If you want to deorbit from the moon and you're it's like I said, this is not perfect or anything, but we're going without maneuver nodes. I have barely any fuel left. As long as I can do an aero capture, I'll be okay. But this is actually the method I ended up having to use to both escape from Joule previously and escape from Ike, because I couldn't land on Duna. Where if you get yourself in an elliptical orbit, you can do the same things you can do on a circular orbit. You just got to watch it. But we got some science from the moon. It's pretty simple to get to. Once again, you just burn on the horizon towards the moon, and then you burn in a retrograde fashion against the rotation of the moon. And that should drop you enough back towards Kerbin, unfortunately for me. And we're going to really time accelerate this because we've seen enough landings here. And this is, of course, going to be, once again, a dark side landing. Yay. We do have enough for an aero capture. Now, I think one other point when I was recording, I accidentally overdid it just a little bit, and you can time accelerate through the periaps still. That is something that is still a thing. So you might want to watch out for that. But we're going to do our same little meat cooker for Jebediah as our apoapsis going back down. We're about to go into a suborbital trajectory. We may hit a new biome here. It's really going to depend on where we land, but we're pretty close to the Kerbal Space Center again, but I don't actually have any more fuel or anything just to slow myself down. But pretty efficient landing, same. You can see the Kerbal Space Program on the right. Not entirely sure why I'm looking at the flight statistics there, but I'm sure it made sense in my mind at the time. But yeah, sunrise right on the horizon. This is probably the closest non-assisted landing I've gotten to the Kerbal Space Center. So we'll play with space planes a little bit later. That's something that I want to learn here. But yeah, we're actually going to be getting a new biome, and I can actually transmit some other stuff, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, simple landing with the sun rising. It's even the default skybox is nice and pretty, but it is easy enough just to get to the moon. And there's... we're just moving around now. All right. So this landing is going to go in there, and I did actually go back here because I have 8.5 meters per second. I have one parachute. This is a pretty heavy thing. I think it's going to be a little too fast, and indeed I was right because we go pop and fall. Fortunately, my canisters didn't explode, so I didn't lose valuable moon science. But the same things that you do on kind of Kerbal or on Kerbin, where you can EVA, you can do here. Where you pop out, you take the same kind of crew reports and everything. You can unload them, load them back in. Especially since I am in a biome that I have not been before. Even though this is really close to the Kerbal Space Center. I didn't do anything like polar missions or a lot of exploration of areas. So, just a little bit of management. A little bit of EVA from Jeb, because while he could roll and try and fix this, there's really no getting this back up on its feet. No great reason to. We're all going to be rescued anyway, so... There's taking the data, storing the data, so you can actually get some more stuff here. I may be able to get a ground sample as well. So EVA report while flying over the grasslands. Cannot transmit from your spacesuit, so go ahead and store that. Okay. So now I'm just narrating things that I did in the past. But once again, the moon, you fly towards it when it's on the horizon. That's pretty simple. And the next video, we're actually going to be doing a trip to Minmus, because that'll start unlocking as well. Actually, you get missions unlocked for a lot of places once you start doing different things in space. And one of the important things about Minmus is that, and this is what kind of blew me away a little bit, and I'm still not exactly sure why the explanation is like this, but if you want to fly to Minmus, as you'll see in the next video, you do the same thing. You get Minmus on the horizon and you just burn. So we're going back to the Kerbal Space Center. Of course, there is the catch that you have to match your plane with Minmus, but we'll talk about how to do that next time. But there we go. The science is recovered. And it's quite a bit of science. 142 science total. 90 science, which is pretty dang good considering what I brought with me, what I managed to recover, and the fact that I didn't do a landing. And we got a little bit of bonus science from contracts as well. So... like I said, my first landing there will probably just be a probe, just because I don't want to have to worry about necessarily returning my crew. Although you can't, because you can collect science from a probe from the surface, and that's all I need to do. But 3 experience gained for Jebediah. That's great. And lots of reputation, so we're all happy there. So in future missions, for things to look forward to the moon, there are nice things that I do like that they added in the latest patch. Like places where you can explore kind of over top. So we'll be definitely doing this contract just to show you the different kinds of ways you can explore the moon. If you have done any of the Kethane mods, you know the value of getting in a polar orbit and how that lets you scan everything. But hey, that's it for now. This is Way to Fail. Hope you enjoyed what you saw. We'll see you next time with more Kerbal Space Program, or next time we're flying the Minmus. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.